Well, ladies and gents, good evening and a really, really warm welcome to you this evening to the Christchurch constituency Parliamentary election hustings. That is quite a mouthful for this time on a Friday evening. It's really great to have you with us. We are not expecting any fire procedures or evacuations. If the fire alarms do go off, you need to be heading for the clearly marked fire exits, and the stewards will open the door in the event that that should happen. This event this evening has been organised and entirely funded by the churches of Christchurch, and I'm so grateful that you're here with us this evening, and we're very grateful to the church here at God First for hosting this gathering. So a warm welcome to you, and can I say a warm welcome as well to those who are joining us via the live stream of this event as well this evening. My name's Chris Brockway. I'm the minister of Christchurch Baptist Church just up the road, and it's my privilege to host this gathering on behalf of the Christchurch churches. We're extremely grateful as well this evening that 7 of our 9 candidates have been able to join us this evening, and I'm sure that you'll want to join me in expressing our sincerest thanks to each and every one of them for all of the sacrifice and the effort that you guys are putting into your particular campaigns in order to serve us as candidates as a Member of Parliament. I wonder if we can show our appreciation to our candidates this evening. Well, in a few moments, we're going to hear some opening statements from each of the candidates, but for now, I want to introduce them by name. We have Christopher Chope from the Conservative Party. Next to him is Michael Cox from the Liberal Democrats. And then moving along the line, Susan Graham from the Green Party, Joanna Howard from the Labour Party, and then for the Independents, Simon McCormack, moving along Steve Unwin from the UK Independence Party, and at the very end, Sasha Jolliffe Yasawi from the Animal Welfare Party. Guys, thank you so much for being with us. 2 of the candidates, Trevor Parsons from the Social Democrat Party and Robin Adamson from Reform UK, declined our invitation to be panellists at the event. The format for this evening, each candidate will be invited to make an introductory statement, and that will be strictly limited to 2 whole minutes. The candidates have already drawn lots to determine which order they will speak in. We have some timekeepers on the front row, and they will clearly indicate when there are 30 seconds left and then 10 seconds left, and you will hear the ding of a bell to let you know when your time has elapsed. After each candidate has made their introductory statement, they'll each be invited to respond to the questions which have been submitted. Now, our questions this evening have been grouped by theme, and to avoid repetition, we're only going to have 1 representative question around each of the themes. Each candidate will have 90 seconds to respond to each question, and again, our timekeepers will indicate when their time is running out. Hopefully this evening, after each candidate has had opportunity to respond, there may well be time for supplementary questions from the floor, but that's entirely dependent upon time. This evening, we're going to try and cover as many themes as we possibly can, but as you'll appreciate, with 9 candidates and 7 represented, time this evening is very tight in order that we can give equity of sharing. Our gathering here will conclude not later than 9 o'clock, before which each of our candidates will have 1 minute to make a closing statement. Now, I'm sure it goes without saying this evening that for this event to be fruitful and worthwhile, it's expected that each of us here this evening will listen respectfully and responsibly to the various issues that are on the table, especially when we might have views that differ from those being expressed. Any disrespectful behaviours won't be tolerated this evening. So thank you so much for being here with us this evening. Your presence here this evening is a very clear indication that you're taking seriously your right and your responsibility to vote on the 4th of July. So thank you so much for being here. So without further ado, it's my real privilege this evening to invite Susan Graham from the Green Party to give her 2-minute introductory statement. Susan, thank you.
I'm both a retired teacher and an earth scientist. My MSc was on climate change, so I know the stakes of failing to address climate change couldn't be higher. Dorset is under threat, are the words of Dorset Wildlife Trust. There is a very rapidly narrowing window of opportunity to enable climate-resilient development and avoid the worst-case scenarios of climate change, are the words of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. We are threatened by an unprecedented decline in species driven by climate change and environmental degradation. Tory government policies are aggravating rather than tackling the climate and nature crises. The Green Party has more serious, robust and effective policies on these crises than all other parties, and this is why I'm here tonight. Our NHS is in crisis, as are all our public services, and the cost of living and housing crises are dire. What we can't do is apply sticking plasters. We have to tackle the crises at the root, and that root is 14 years of Tory austerity coupled with turning virtually a blind eye to climate and nature. Labour and Lib Dem policies are too weak, and reform, well, they don't really have climate and nature policies. I wish to urgently address the climate crisis, clean up our rivers and sea, make Christchurch resilient to worsening flooding, and restore all our public services. Climate and nature, social and economic well-being go hand in hand. It's time to listen to scientists.
Susan, thank you so much, and perfectly timed. And now to Michael Cox for the Liberal Democrats. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, well, first of all, I want to thank Chris and the churches for inviting us to be present today, this evening, for you to listen. Whoever is elected next week must be able to fight hard on the issues and the policies which are important to the residents of Christchurch and East Dorset. These issues include, but are not limited to, the ongoing pollution of our rivers and our local environment, the decline in the funding of our schools, the NHS and care services which are on their knees, the sustainability of our town centres, and the future of our children who are facing climate change. We need a candidate who can lead with empathy, who truly understands our problems and who will fight hard for us irrespective of fear or favour. I live in Herne with my wife Fiona, and between us we have 4 children and 4 grandchildren. I have a history of getting involved in the local community where I live. I have acted as a school governor for 25 years, served as a local councillor for 13 years, and I'm currently the treasurer of Age Concern Christchurch and Ukraine Relief Aid based in Castle Point. I currently serve as the portfolio holder for finance on BCP, where 15 months ago I inherited a £44 million deficit in the budget from the previous disastrous Conservative administration. In 12 months, I filled that gap using traditional methods while not flogging off a single beach hut. I'm a chartered accountant who runs his own firm. I have a significant experience in business and the local community, but most of all, I have a personal commitment to this place that we all call home. My contact details are all publicly available, so if you ever have a problem, please do not hesitate to contact me. Our community needs a person with experience who is already embedded in our community. He or she should be concerned about the growth of food banks and the sewage in our rivers, rather than being interested in arcane parliamentary procedures. I came second last time, and I'm currently second in the polls. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to the discussion that follows.
Right, thank you. And thirdly, we have opportunity to hear from Sasha Jolliffe Yasawi, Animal Welfare Party. Sash, thank you.
Good evening. Thank you for inviting me. It's great to see so many people here. I'm Sash, and I'm representing Animal Welfare Party. Originally from Kazakhstan, I've lived in the area for nearly 25 years. And I am best known for my advocacy in the animal rights movement. Recently, I received a suspended 9-week prison sentence after being convicted of aggravated trespass following a protest at Toaster Greyhound Racing. The protest aimed to raise awareness that non-human animals are not objects for gambling or exploitation. My conviction and sentence demonstrate two things. One, there is a flaw in our justice system that not only permits but encourages exploitation. And the second one is I am willing to put my neck on the line to help those who need help, not just those who deserve it. With a strong passion for activism and animal rights, and recognizing that humans are also animals, just of different species, I am committed to creating a fairer world and helping as many beings as I can in my lifetime. I'm standing in this election because our community faces urgent challenges needing immediate, compassionate action. Issues like exploitation, climate crises, traffic congestion, water pollution, and protecting all living beings require innovative yet ethical solutions. This election is about more than policies. It is about our vision for the health of our planet and community. Thank you.
Sasha, thank you. And the independent candidate, Simon McCormack, thank you.
Know me, my name is Simon McCormack and I'm standing as an independent candidate. I have lived in Christchurch my whole life and was educated here in our local schools. I started my plumbing and maintenance business here in 2011 and have spent many years maintaining a lot of the wonderful buildings we have here in Christchurch. As both a town councillor and a BCP councillor for the past 5 years, I've put myself at the heart of our community. I've ensured that the things that are most important to our residents are at the top of the council's agenda and always made sure I'm available to residents when needed. Our country has spent the better part of a century shifting between Tory and Labour governments, and it is my belief that this constant shift between these two parties has led to many of the problems we have today. We have all received many manifestos from these parties over the years. How many of the promises on those manifestos have been broken? In this election, I chose not to release a manifesto. Instead, I choose to stand on a set of principles, to work hard and try to vote in the fairest way possible, as I always have. One of my top concerns is the housing market. Many of you know that Maslow's hierarchy of needs places housing as a basic need, and I feel that if many people had a safe, affordable and secure home, a lot of the issues that we have in society will naturally decrease. Solving the housing crisis must be at the forefront of any new government's agenda. As an independent, I am free of a party whip and don't have any major donors pulling my strings. This means 100% of my time and attention is to you, the resident. If you elect me on the 4th of July, my promise to you is to be present, contactable, accountable and honest. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Simon. And then fifthly, Christopher Chope, the Conservative Party. Thank you.
Well, may I begin, Chris, by thanking you for organising this event. And as has happened in previous hustings, it's very well attended, and it's great to see so many people here. Can I say that I'm actually rather nervous this evening because although I've had the privilege of representing the Christchurch constituency since 1997, this is the first election in which I've felt under enormous pressure. And that's because of the situation in which the government has found itself following the crises of the Ukraine invasion and of COVID-19. And we are having to face up to the consequences of that. And this election inevitably is looking backwards. But I would urge people to look forward to the future and what we can achieve. And on that basis, I put myself forward again as your candidate to be your Member of Parliament. And in so doing, would draw attention to the fact that this is essentially a two-horse race, both nationally and locally. And Mike Cox has just said he's the second in the polls. This morning, I looked at the betting odds on it is odds checker, And odds checker shows that in this constituency, it's either the Conservatives or Labour. And you can put a bet on Reform at 40-1 against, Lib Dems 50-1 against, and Greens at 200-1 against. So I don't think that's consistent with the assertion that the Lib Dems are second in the polls in this constituency. And Mike made a sideswipe about me getting involved in detail in parliamentary procedure. All I can say is that my knowledge of parliamentary procedure has been able to deliver results in this constituency, not least in getting a private member's bill through on Park Homes.
Christopher, thank you very much. Two more candidates to share. Sixthly, Joanna Howard from the Labour Party. Thank you. It will be. Carry on.
Oh, thank you, Chris. My name is Joanna Howard. I moved here in 2019. Together with my husband, we have 3 wonderful children. I'm also a lawyer, and key to myself and my profession is honesty and integrity. I'm 100% committed to fighting for a better future for my children and everybody in this community. As a family, we've seen firsthand the strain on the NHS, how difficult it is to get a dentist appointment. I've witnessed antisocial behaviour firsthand, and I see the impact on communities of feeling like the police cannot help them. I worry that when my children are older, they won't be able to afford to buy their own home here. I've spoken to people on the doorstep. They share these worries. They are not optimistic. When you come to cast your vote on the 4th of July, ask yourself, do your public services look like they're at breaking point? Do you feel safe in your communities? Do you feel optimistic about the future for yourself, but also your children and grandchildren? There's a real choice at this election, a choice between chaos and failure with a Conservative government, or a choice for a stability and a brighter future with a changed Labour Party. If Labour wins, if the polling's correct, and if you elect me to be your MP on the 4th of July, you'll have an MP who's not on the opposition benches. You'll have an MP who's part of government and who can advocate for everybody in Christchurch and to make sure that Christchurch gets its fair share of investment. You have a real choice at this election. If you want to change for Christchurch, please vote for Labour on the 4th of July. Thank you.
Joanna, thank you. And lastly, in our opening statement, Steve Unwin, UK Independence Party. Thank you.
Hello there. My name is Steve Unwin. I've lived in Dorset for 30 years. I am an antiquarian and second-hand bookseller. We do it online. I've been doing that for 21 years. I am the UK Independence Party's national spokesman on home affairs, political reform, and local government. I have a law degree, my friends say with dubious honours, and I'm standing for UKIP. Now, the UK Independence Party has always stood for a free, independent, democratic, United Kingdom. And of course, everyone thought, when we had the Brexit vote, that was the job done. The reality is, with overarching international bodies such as the ECHR, the WEF, and so on, we are not a self-governing, independent, proud nation, and we are fighting to achieve that. We also want independence for the UK so that we're far more self-sufficient when it comes to food supply and also energy supply. So we have a robust number of policies that go against the current agenda on the sort of the global issues, that we believe that we should use our land for the production of wholesome food and not for housing wind farms and rewilding and all the rest of it. We need to produce food for our families.
Steve, thank you so much. So we get into the main body of our questions now, and our team out the front have been gathering those questions and weighing them by quantity to work out what the most pressing issues are. And we're going to begin with a question around the NHS. Where we can, we're going to ask the questions from the floor. This is a question from Louisa Hardy, which was submitted online. Is Louisa here? No, I can't see her. So the question that Louisa asked is this. She says, I work for the NHS locally, and we really struggle to recruit the allied health professionals, AHP, in Dorset, because it's an expensive place to live, and because there aren't enough new graduates coming through the university. This is the last place they would choose, she says. What will you be doing to ensure more students want to study the AHP professions at university and thus improve recruitment within the NHS? A number of you mentioned the NHS in your opening statements. An opportunity to respond to this more specific question from Louisa. Mike, can we begin with you?
Certainly, the Liberal Democrats have made the NHS its number one priority in this election, and we've set out a number of policies which we aim to achieve. But to address her question specifically, we've recently had the opportunity to sell some land at the University Hospital in Bournemouth to Bournemouth. We own the land at the back of the hospital, and we had an opportunity and the hospital wanted to buy it, and they wanted to build houses for key workers. And that is exactly what she wants. She wants people who can afford to live here, who work in our care sector or health sector. And we've arranged to sell it to them at a fair market value. That has been bitterly opposed by the local Conservatives, who are saying all sorts of things that are completely untrue. And so this is the Liberal Democrats in action, taking practical decisions to make life better for the health service and those who work in the health service.
Thank you very much. Simon McCormack, can we come to you next?
Yeah, thank you. I think the main thing is to incentivise the younger people to want to go into those professions. At the moment, I think there's when you switch the news on every day and you see that working in frontline NHS is not a particularly nice environment, that's not going to be encouraging to those younger people to want to go into those professions. The other thing around them wanting to stay here and work here and recruit here, it comes back to what I said in my opening speech about housing. I feel like if they could afford to live around here, then we would be able to retain those staff. And I feel like we probably need to build a lot more homes to bring those prices down to make it more sustainable to live around here.
Thanks very much, Simon. Sasha, can we come to you?
Policies are rooted in compassion and sustainability and fairness. So we prioritize the climate and biodiversity crisis, advocating for plant-based diets. That's to improve health and reduce NHS cost. So I think promoting sustainable and affordable housing and transport to enhance the community, and I hope that will sort of address the issue of bringing more sort of younger people, younger population to the area. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Susan, can we come to you next?
Well, it's no accident that the NHS in general is in a state of crisis, at risk of collapse. This is no accident at all. This is Tory underfunding for at least 14 years. It's not surprising that students are not have the incentives to study medicine. First of all, university fees are far too high. They come out of university. Medical students need very many years at university with the most enormous debts. And then they start on a very low pay. So junior doctors are underpaid, nurses are underpaid because there isn't enough money being put into the NHS. It's been continued to be underfunded. So what we obviously need to do is give students incentives to study medicine with good working conditions and a decent rate of pay for what they're putting in. Thank you.
Susan, thank you. You made direct reference to Conservative policy, so Christopher will come to you next, if that's okay.
Thank you. And isn't it a pity that nobody has mentioned up to now the massive investment in the Royal Bournemouth Hospital, which is under the New Hospitals programme, has got a state-of-the-art accident and emergency unit, which will be fully opened next year and fully staffed, and that's going to be of immense use for the local community. And the way to attract people into the health service and the medical profession is to ensure that we've got state-of-the-art facilities in which they can operate. And I went to see the new pathology lab as well, and to see the people who are really enthused about being able to use the new technology which is available there. On the health service, one of the issues I've been trying to tackle is the threat to the local GP services in Burton. And that's an example where it's one thing to talk about having more GPs, but what's actually being done to ensure that we retain the GP services in Burton and reject the ill-advised planning application to turn it into a veterinary practice. And I hope that we're going to get some support from the two of the local councillors who are here today when it comes to planning on that matter.
Thanks very much. Steve Unwin, we'll come to you next, if that's okay, followed by Joanna to close.
Since 1986, the nursing changed from the old system, which was effectively like an apprenticeship where they were on low salaries but were provided with accommodation and they earned as they learned. It's all been degree entry mechanisms since 1986. We would reverse that. We would go back to the way it used to be, where they could actually earn and learn at the same time, rather than build up huge debts. And this is just to go into nursing. We would also reinstate the state-registered nurses, SRNs, under the system as it used to be. It was a very effective system. The other thing, we've become reliant, rather over-reliant on migration to fill in jobs. So what we're doing is effectively getting our fat imperial checkbook out to attract trained medical professionals from probably trained in poorer countries than ours, and we're taking all their expertise and using that. That's a bad method. We should invest in training our young people.
Thanks very much. Joanna, thank you.
It's absolutely right that these professions deserve better pay and better working conditions. When they come to the government and say that that's what they want, we shouldn't just ignore them. We should sit round the table and negotiate with them. We also need to ensure that we have more affordable housing. I've met many people who work locally who said they can't afford to live here and they're going to relocate to a different country so they can afford a better way of life. We need a big local house building program so people can afford to buy their own home, so they can rent suitable homes if they want to. We've got this fantastic regeneration in the local hospital. Hopefully that will bring people in, but it's quite right also that we should be training more people locally. I was speaking to a local councillor yesterday about whether we might see that in the future. It would be fantastic if we saw growth in the local training facilities in the hospital, so that we can do that locally and hopefully retain people long term. Thank you.
Joanna, thank you so much. Well, over these more weighty issues that are coming up at the beginning, I want to give plenty of time for supplementary questions from the floor. We've got some mic runners. If you've got a question that you would like to ask directed at one or more of the candidates, feel free to do so. We are going to try and give equal opportunity for the candidates to share, so please just bear that in mind if you could. Who's got the mics, guys? If we could come to the gents, yeah, can one of you run? That would be really helpful, thank you. We've lost our mic runner. Nigel, do you mind helping us out? Thank you. Gentleman on the very back row, if you could just say who you are and then ask your question, that would be fantastic. Thank you.
Hi, good evening. My name's Paul Brown. I live in Burton, Christchurch. Of all of the candidates, we talk about these things, NHS, infrastructure, building. Of all of you, what are your views on the current BCP planning for the future in terms of housing, infrastructure in this place in which we live? Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much for your question, Paul. So, guys, 1 minute to respond to these if you want to respond. There's no compulsion to respond at all. Any of you wanting to respond? So the fusion here of these two questions of housing, but also our main theme was the NHS. Mike, thank you.
Thanks for the question. We have just gone through a big consultation on planning, led actually by Councillor Margaret Phipps, who's sitting in the middle there, and has done a fantastic job at actually bringing everybody together to look at their individual areas and what should happen in their individual wards. That consultation has gone out. It's going back to the government, and I'm sure it'll come back again. We've had the opportunity to look at this. It's been consulted widely, and it will go on to the next stage. And we have to have that, because if we don't have it, then actually the central government imposes all sorts of restrictions on us as to what we can and can't build. So actually, we must have that plan put forward and approved as soon as possible.
Thanks very much. Yeah, Simon, thank you.
Thank you very much. I was going to mention the local government reorganisation, and during the merger of the councils, which I was heavily against, during that time they didn't take into account future growth. So within here in BCP, there actually isn't a lot of development land to do much with. So in terms of building on what we've already got, we're very limited by that choice because there isn't that much land to build on or to do much with. If you look at the local plan, which should be adopted sometime soon, there's a map in there that shows you what land we can develop and what services need to be developing, and they really didn't think of that during local government reorganisation.
Thank you. Yeah, Christopher.
On Burton, it's a community, Burton and Winkton, of about 4,000 people. And the idea that that community can manage without a GP surgery is absolutely abominable. So I revert to that because you sir, live in Burton. But another issue which is relevant to Burton is that the wastewater treatment works at Stony Lane is going to be upgraded by the year 2030. And as a result of that, we will then be able to free up more land for fresh housing, which is currently brownfield land and unavailable for development.
Thank you. Any other candidates wishing to respond? Feel free. Yeah, Steve, thank you.
I'll just say that in the days when the Conservative Party was vaguely conservative, it believed in a thing called supply and demand. Now, we already have a massive, massive housing problem. Last year alone, net migration was 685,000 net migration. The number of new houses registered in the same year was 246,700. That's according to the electricity, the EPC certificates. And that's a national figure. So we're not even building enough to accommodate new people coming into this country. If you have people coming into the country, they have to live somewhere. You've got to do that. So we're not even accommodating for that, and forget about the problems that we already have here. So supply and demand.
Thank you. Joanna, carry on.
It's absolutely right that we need more housing. I accept that, that's a particular challenge in Christchurch. We're going to have to be creative. I'm really grateful. I went to the Christchurch Residents Association meeting. There are people here who will be able to feed into that and really, really help contribute to where the best places for those new housing can be. If I'm elected, I'd be really listening carefully to them and other representatives to make sure that the house building took place in the right place for the right people. Thank you.
Mike's asking to come back, but Susan, Sasha, anything to say before that? Yeah, Susan.
Yes, hello. Is it work? Yeah. Okay. So yes, of course, we need more housing. About 150,000 new homes. And I just want to address the fact that we don't have endless land to build homes on. And so this is why it's so important to end the right to buy, to build homes which will always belong to the community forever, so that we don't have all these homeless people. Thank you.
We would prioritize creating sustainable and affordable social housing. And we would focus on the brownfield developments, not the greenfield developments. And also important to improve the existing social housing stock, but also efficient use of vacant properties, and also address the homelessness and to meet the housing demand. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mike, just very briefly.
Emphasise the fact, as Sir Christopher said, that the sewage works are not fit for purpose at the moment, and it's taking 5 years, which is 5 years too long as far as I'm concerned, to sort out, because at the moment there is effectively a ban on house building in the Christchurch area because of excess nutrients in the River Avon. There is every house that has to be built has to have a £75,000 levy put on it to sort out the nutrients. Now that's just not sustainable. So you know, our children are going to suffer because there's not going to be enough houses in the future because of that.
Thank you. Another supplementary question, if we can try and stick to the theme of NHS, sewerage or housing. Amazing how we ended up there, that would be really great. Yeah, lady just there, black and white. Thank you, Kevin, very much.
You're all talking about housing, but I just want to put this scenario to you. My daughter's a dementia psychologist. Her partner, fiance, is a pharmacist who's under immense pressure from all the extra things that they've been expected to do, even though they're getting not any pay recognition for that. They've been saving diligently for a deposit. They're living with me. At their age, I had owned a home for 6 years, and they're getting nowhere near being able to even get a mortgage. So with cost of living and, you know, with difficulties in this area with housing prices, I appreciate that you're all putting housing forward, but you've also got to look at how people are actually going to afford to get mortgages and not be priced out of the market.
Thank you. Yeah, Simon, opportunity to respond. What are you going to do to help Steph's daughter and partner in their situation?
At the moment, here in Christchurch, the average house price is 13 times the average income. Now, many of you know that mortgage companies will only lend 4, maybe 5 times the average income. With the average income being at £30,000, that means the maximum mortgage that somebody on £30,000 a year could achieve is £150,000. I actually looked last week, and the cheapest one-bedroom flat here in Christchurch was £200,000, which means you'd need a £50,000 deposit just to get a one-bedroom flat here in Christchurch. That actually puts housing out of reach of most people. The reality is, quite frankly, one, who has caused this? I'll tell you who's caused this. The house prices were 4 times the average income at the end of the 90s. The Labour Party then came into power for a number of years, and the house prices increased. The Conservatives then came into power. The house prices increased even more. This problem has been created by the 2 main political parties over the last 20 years. The only solution right now is to build more houses.
Joanna, why don't you respond?
This is a really important policy in the Labour Party manifesto. They really want to help first-time buyers get on the ladder. They're going to have a mortgage guarantee scheme to help people in work who struggle to save for a mortgage to make sure that they can buy their first home. When we build all these new homes, they don't want them to be sold off to international developers who are just going to make more profit. They're going to give first-time buyers the opportunity to buy their first home first. So Labour are very much keen to support, people like your family to make sure they can get on the home and they can stay and live in their local community where they work. Thank you.
Thank you. Christopher, Simon made reference to Conservative policy as well. Did you want to respond to that?
Well, thank you. There are 2 aspects to this. Obviously, anybody wanting to become a homeowner for the first time, they've got a deposit issue, and then they've got the high interest rates. The deposit issue, the Conservative manifesto has got specific proposals on the Help to Buy to enable first-time buyers to be able to get help with their deposit, and also to remove stamp duty for them on the price of a house, which in this area is quite significant. And on interest rates, the best way of keeping interest rates down is by reducing inflation, and that's what the government's been achieving recently.
Thank you. Susan, feel free to carry on.
Yes, well, all of this is part of the cost of living crisis, isn't it? The wealthiest 10% of our population now own 43% of the wealth. Billionaires have increased from 29 to 171 in the last 14 years. This is due to wrong taxing, Tory austerity, and favouring the wealthiest sector of the population. I'd like to just mention homelessness again. Maybe you remember a young veteran frozen to death a few years ago on the steps of the town hall in Bournemouth. This is a serious problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Any of the other candidates who haven't spoken yet on this supplementary question? No obligation to? No, okay, thank you very much. Well, I hope you don't mind that we gave significant time to that, and I want to give significant time to our next question as well. Again, I can't see her in the room, having now had her question chosen. Tracy Blick, Christchurch Food Bank, is not with us. Many of us will know about the food bank here in Christchurch, a weighty local issue, which was the second most important category that we're thinking about this evening. Tracy, the manager of the food bank, says this: "We daily encounter families, especially working families, who are living below the poverty line. We're also seeing increasing numbers of homeless, working young people, vulnerably housed and domestic violence families in temporary accommodation. The effect of the 5-week wait for universal credit and rise in the cost of living is having a devastating effect." Here's her question: "How will you and your party take action to deal with these issues? And will you come and visit the food bank?" I think that's an invitation if you are elected. Can we kick off this main question with Steve, please, UK Independence Party? Thank you.
All right, this is directly from the UKIP manifesto. I'm on the body that co-writes it. And this bit, I actually added this to the manifesto, which was agreed unanimously. "It's deeply regrettable that there is ever-increasing demand for food banks in the 21st century Britain. If those attending food banks are in such dire straits that they need food handouts, there is a high likelihood that they will also need additional support to deal with issues such as debt, family breakdown, addiction, and poor physical or mental health. Many will need employment or legal advice. We would therefore contribute to the important work done by food banks and develop them into community advice centres for those most in need. We would, if we were in government, would train and fund the cost of 2,500 advisors to work in the 2,500 food banks, so the poorest in our society have free and easy access to timely help in their hour of need." So that's exactly from our manifesto. I've obviously read that out. Now, yes, of course, I would obviously visit the food bank. But this is a major issue. 9 years ago, there were 800 food banks. There's now 2,500. Think how many people that are so desperate.
Thank you very much. Christopher, can I invite you to respond next?
Yes, I mean, Tracy does a fantastic job with her team in Christchurch, and we all much appreciate that. And it's not just a food bank, it's Food Bank Plus, and I think that this question really makes that point, that people who have to find themselves in a food bank, they often need help in many other respects. And dealing specifically with the question about the 5-week wait for benefit, this is a very difficult issue. There used not to be that wait, and the consequence was you could get benefits straight away, but it meant that if you got into a job, although you might have to wait 4 weeks for your first salary, your benefit was cut off as soon as you got into that job. And that's why the system was changed. And that's during those 5 weeks that people are without benefit, that's where the food bank can play a really important part. But the alternative to that is to go back to a situation in which there is no incentive for people to go out and get work, because as soon as they get work, their benefits are cut off and they don't get any income for another 4 weeks.
We'll have opportunity for supplementary questions in a minute. Joanna from the Labour Party, thank you.
I recently spoke to the CAB in Christchurch, and in 1 year they had over 4,200 inquiries to access the local food bank. Poverty is a really serious issue in Christchurch. We might not always see it. A lot of working people are in poverty. I've got friends who work in the NHS who have to claim universal credit. There is a real cost of living crisis here. We need to make work pay for people. We need a proper living wage so people can afford to live, they can afford to pay their bills. We need to end this 5-week wait so that people can claim their benefits straight away when they really need them. It's punishing people to make them wait and to have to go to a food bank and claim that extra help. It just shouldn't happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Sasha.
Thank you. Diverting the subsidies from animal agriculture to a more sustainable plant-based food system will be far more cost-effective, of course, and tackling social inequality involves reforming social security and ensuring it covers life's essentials. So we must address the root cause of poverty and provide support to those in need, reducing the reliance on food banks.
Thank you. Simon.
Thank you. As the lead member for homelessness and cost of living for BCP Council, I've been at the forefront of this particular subject for the past year, but in reality for the past 7 years, also volunteering at another local charity that deals with a similar thing. People that fall into the cost of living tend to fall into 3 categories. They're either having housing problems, problems with their utility payments, or problems with income. Now, first of all, I'll address the homelessness thing. In 2011, here locally, we had a direct access homeless shelter where if you became homeless, you could walk in off the street and somebody would be there to help you. The then Conservative administration in 2011 in Bournemouth shut that direct access. So now you have to go through a whole process where a homeless worker has to come out and see you multiple times for you to be verified as homeless. That situation traps people into homelessness because they move around a lot. If you've ever dealt with helped a street homeless person, they move around a lot. Food poverty is another one where I feel that if we were to make strong trade agreements with countries that produce a lot of food, we could bring those food costs down. I feel like the government has not put enough effort into that, and that would significantly help.
Thank you. Susan, then to Mike. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, well, it is a national scandal, isn't it, that one of the richest countries in the world, and we have people who can't afford to eat or heat, and children in poverty. I think we need to increase universal credit. I think we need to end the bedroom tax. I think we need to increase disability allowance. Of course, we need to end the 5-week wait for benefits. We need to abolish the 2-child cap on benefits. That would lift 250,000 children out of poverty. 250,000 children. We need free home insulation so that, people don't have to spend money that they don't have on heating their homes. We need subsidised public transport. This all helps with climate change as well, and the environment, of course, and clean air, and our general health and happiness. And we need to invest in public services, of course. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. In the nicest possible way, I'd quite like to make Tracy redundant. We shouldn't need a food bank, but we have one. And I find it a matter of deep shame that a country of our riches, of our wealth, is having to give food away to the poorest in society. I 100% agree with Susan in terms of the two-child cap. That is one of the key policies for the Liberal Democrats as well. It is appalling that we're sending children, hundreds of thousands of children, into poverty. It's just not acceptable. So, you know, the sooner we can sort out our tax and benefit system, which is completely broken, the better. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so various issues raised there around food poverty, around food banks, around the cost of living, also some information and shared there about the benefit system as well. Opportunity for supplementary questions from the floor. If you've got something on those themes, feel free to raise your hand. Yeah, gentleman at the back. Thanks, Kevin. Just say who you are if you would. That would really help.
My name is Ian. I've lived in Christchurch since about 1985. There are so many key issues in this election and any election, whether it's housing, immigration, cost of living, you name it. For me, the overriding issue is trust and integrity. I have been let down so many times by people in power or people pretending to be in power, giving promises which either they cannot or ever fulfill, but it's like a wish list. I could go to the Labour Party, I could go net zero, I could go to the Liberal Democrats, student loans, I could go to the Conservatives, choose one of thousands. But I apologise for any other people because I don't use so well, but for the key issue that overrides all of this, how can we trust you? And I don't want to hear other people say, well, you can't trust them, you can't trust them. Why can we trust you anymore?
Okay, Ian, thank you so much. Slightly wider question, which maybe is fine. Why don't we deal with the question, how can we trust you? And let's speak very specifically around these issues we've been looking at around food poverty, around food banks, around benefits, etc. Susan, thank you.
Yes, well, the reason you can trust the Green Party is that we don't accept bribes. We don't accept enormous donations. We're not in the pockets of any big companies or organisations. We accept donations and fundraising from ordinary people like you and me. Thank you.
Simon, yeah, thank you.
I've always believed that trust is built and not just given, and I've spent the last 5 years within my ward, my council ward, being there, making sure every single time a resident has asked me to be there, be there.
Thank you. Anyone else? So can we trust you, Steve?
Well, I can hand on heart say I haven't accepted any bribes because I've never been offered any. My campaign has been self-funded. I've paid for the leaflets myself. I've paid my deposit myself. I'm not in anyone's pocket. UK independence.
Thank you, Mike. Yeah.
I completely agree with Simon that trust has to be earned. You can't just assume it. I have to put my hands up and say, yes, you're absolutely right. The Liberal Democrats did let you down massively in terms of tuition fees, and boy, did we pay the price electorally. But we have been through the manifesto in huge detail to make sure that never happens again. And that's what I can promise you. Like Susan, we don't accept donations from big companies or trade unions, and therefore we are in nobody's pocket but our members. Every member has one vote, and they decide the policy, much to the chagrin of most of our leaders, I have to say.
Thank you. Christopher?
Well, I think you've got to separate the political parties from their individual representatives. And if, like me, you've been in the House of Commons, you can see across party the people who you can trust and you can rely upon them. And most of them are people who we would call independently minded. They are not kowtowed to the party whip. They will stand up for causes which they believe are just. And I give as an example Diana Johnson, who's been a Labour MP campaigning fearlessly for those who are victims of contaminated blood. And I'm wearing a tie today given to me by one of my constituents because I also have been involved in that campaign to get justice for the victims of contaminated blood. That's an example of what individual MPs can do aside from their parties.
Would you like to tell us why we can trust you? And then Sasha.
Absolutely. Trust absolutely has to be earned. The Labour Party knows it's got to earn the trust back of the country. It's got a fully costed manifesto. Its ambition is that when it comes round to the next election, they'll be able to hold up the manifesto and we'll be able to say, yes, we did what we said we would. We know, it's not going to be easy. That's our ambition with our manifesto, is to earn back the country's trust so that we can be a party of government once again. Thank you.
Sasha.
That's a very easy question for me to answer. Our policies are based on ethics and compassion, and that's what we always put at the front of everything that we do and all the policies that we present to you. Thank you.
Thanks very much. So, another opportunity for a supplementary question, if we can try and keep it on this kind of local issues theme. Yeah, young lady here. Thanks, Nigel. Just say who you are for us, that would be great.
Hello, my name is Eva, I'm 21 years old. Just on the topic of justice there, as Christopher Chope mentioned. So my question is for all of you, but mainly aimed at Christopher Chope. So in 2018, you blocked the bill for upskirting to be made a specific criminal offence. Thank you. In 2019, you blocked the bill for the protection against female genital mutilation. Reasoning, you disagree. Reasoning, you disagree with private members' bills, despite many successful and landmark legislations like legalising same-sex marriage and abolishing the death penalty, starting from private members' bills, and being key parts of British society and government.
Can I encourage you to get to a question, Eva? That would be fab. Thank you.
As a young person in your constituency, it's deeply concerning that you are more in a disagreement with the process of PMBs than you are with the actual topics that are being discussed. So my question to you is, will you still refuse to back private members' bills, despite recently voting on them and just choosing when you don't agree with them? Would you still disregard the severity of the topic at hand? And despite you being elected to vote on behalf of your constituency, who very publicly in the past and now have clearly lost trust and respect in you,
okay, Eva,
after your...
I'm going to stop you in 5 seconds,
Okay. Has this disagreement from your constituents changed your mind on private members' bills?
Thank you. Christopher, have opportunity to respond. Eva, thank you for your question at 21. Very articulate. Brilliant.
I'm sorry the lady had to read out her question because she had a prepared text. If she'd listened to what I said earlier on, she would know that I was successful in steering through a private member's bill to get enacted in the last Parliament. And that was a bill which enables those who live in park homes to have much lower increases in their pitch fees than otherwise would have been the case. So that was a private member's bill which I steered through Parliament myself. And dealing with the specific issues which she's raised, can I just refer to the fact that this is back in February 2019, Dr. Brenda Kelly in The Guardian wrote and said there are already powers in law to protect children at risk of FGM, and the Conservative MP's objection to a private member's bill not going through on a nod was reasonable. That's what she said, somebody who corresponded with The Guardian and is an expert in this issue. And I'm afraid in the time available, we can't get into the detail of it, but if you would like to look at this article, you will be able to understand that I have been completely misrepresented on this issue. I was never against FGM being criminalised.
Okay, thank you. Eva's question directed at Christopher there, but each of you, opportunity if you'd like to. How will you be using private members' bills in Parliament? Steve, you're going for a mic grab. Simon as well. Let's go Steve, then Simon. Thank you.
I think that it's unreasonable to expect a member of Parliament on a private member's bill to vote one way when they don't agree at all with that. So to a large extent, it's quite reasonable that if an MP has a conscience, they should vote with their conscience and actually screw the party whips.
Thank you, Simon.
Do you know, since that incident with the upskirting, I've always wondered about private members' bills, because if you've got a group of residents and you're representing them through a private members' bill, and you would like to get your constituents that you represent to the top of the list, you have to object to other private member bills that are ahead of it. And so I've always wondered, since that incident with that particular private members' bill, how I would have voted, because I would have been keen to get my residents to the top of the list. So simply objecting would get my constituents to the top of the list. So I'm not defending either way, but I think it is important that people look into how private members' bills work and the listings and how you object and everything else, and try and put yourself perhaps in those shoes and say, what would I have done in that position?
Thank you. Mike, are you wanting to respond?
So, from my understanding, Sir Christopher objected to these perfectly sensible bills because he wanted to promote his own bills. Now, that seems wrong to me when those issues are so important, and they were so live and important at the time. And I felt that was incredibly wrong.
Kristen, 30 seconds to respond.
I didn't object to the private members' bill's substance. What I objected to was them going through on the nod without proper debate. And if one looks at what happened during the COVID lockdowns, we didn't have sufficient debate about the criminalisation of various activities, and that's why a lot of people are now calling for people who were convicted under the COVID lockdown to be released.
I'm just wondering what kind of debate we need to stop upskirting and female genital mutilation. What debate is needed? Sorry, I'm a bit confused here.
Anyone who hasn't responded yet, an opportunity? No, that's fine. Okay.
Just come back on that last point.
30 seconds.
We're talking about electing members to Parliament. If the proposition is that we don't need to have any debate in Parliament, what's the point of having a general election?
Okay, thank you. We are going to move on to our next category of questions. Again, I hope we'll have time for some supplementary questions. This question has been submitted by Alex Spencer-Taylor. Is Alex here? Not doing very well with these, are we? Okay, well, I will ask the question on his behalf. Alex is in the 18 to 29 category, and this is on the theme of climate. So, Susan, we're going to come to you first. And he says this: according to the State of Dorset 2023, I think that's a report, Dorset's greenhouse gas emissions have fallen by only 4% in the last few years. What will candidates do to encourage more growth in Dorset's environmental economy? Susan, we'll kick off with you. Thank you.
Okay, well, I've only got 90 seconds. I need 90 minutes. Net zero carbon is absolutely urgent. 7 billion annually we need to spend on climate adaptation. Carbon tax, polluters need to pay more tax in order to invest in the green transition. No new licenses for extracting fossil fuels. The IPCC are very clear on that, and these are the experts. End all subsidies to oil and gas. We're looking at needing 80 gigawatts of offshore wind, 53 gigawatts of onshore wind, and 100 gigawatts of solar by 2035. The UK can be 70% powered, the electric can be powered from wind by 2030. We need community ownership of sustainable energy infrastructure, and we need to invest in skills and training for new roles. Fossil fuel industry is on its way out sooner or later, better sooner. A stitch in time. You've all heard of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Simon, if we can come to you. Thank you.
I think I would increase the budget, the government budget for research and development. At the moment, solar panels and wind farms, they produce a lot of energy, but I feel like the technology could be pushed much, much further and produce much, much more energy, and therefore would become more commercially viable in terms of building more. So it would attract more investment by simply being better. And I feel like if the government pushed for more research and development and made the technology better, we could probably make it more commercially viable.
Thanks very much. Mike, if we can come to you.
Sure. I think the question was to do with Dorset in particular.
It was.
And therefore, what I would suggest is that we need to increase the renewable energy that we produce in Dorset, and instead of having oil farms on its edge. I would also insist that new homes in Dorset should be completely net zero going forward. That would help enormously, as well as actually retrofitting all homes with insulation.
Great, thanks very much. Very succinct. Okay, if we can come to Christopher Chope next. Thank you.
We can't look at this just from a Dorset perspective. We've got to look at it from a national perspective. And it's fair to say that between 1990 and 2022, the United Kingdom has halved emissions whilst growing its economy by 80%. And it's halved emissions faster than any other G7 country. Our emissions are now below 1% of the global emissions, and we cannot sacrifice our own economic prosperity and make ourselves even more dependent upon China. And that's one of my biggest concerns, is that China is the beneficiary of this hair shirt approach to a lot of these environmental issues.
Thank you. Sasha, thank you.
Animal agriculture is actually the biggest contributor to greenhouse gases. So therefore, by promoting plant-based diet, we can significantly not only decrease the environmental impact, but also improve public health as well. But also, there is also water pollution in our rivers as well that's caused by animal agriculture that also must be addressed first. Which is the cause, but we are actually trying to come up with solutions to treat the symptoms, not the actual cause. So thank you.
Thank you. And if we can come to Steve next, just a reminder, these are the main questions, so you have got 90 seconds if you want to use all of your time.
Yes. I agree with Christopher in that you can't just look at this on a Dorset basis, but I don't actually agree that you look on it on a national basis either. This is a global issue, and there is no point us in the UK committing economic hari-kari when we're just exporting our problems. So, for example, our steel industry is going over to China, and they're building coal-fired power stations, let alone anything else. Same is happening in India on a massive, massive scale. So if we're turning, basically exporting the production of our goods to China and then having it all shipped back via container ships on diesel fuel, what's that doing to the climate compared to building things locally and having local jobs? I also don't actually agree with all this sort of cows are creating all the emissions. If we all went onto beans and Vegemite, we'd be producing the emissions.
Just before we go to Joanna, Sasha, did you want to respond to that, since it was directed at you, I think?
Well, yes, whilst it was a joke, but it is a serious matter. And this actually reminds me of the film Don't Look Up, where we repeatedly brought to you so many studies that actually prove it's not just about what the cows. Okay, it is a disaster that we really need to deal with. So animal agriculture is responsible for approximately 80% of deforestation, and only about 70% of harvested crops out of the, nearly 80% of harvested crops are used to feed the animals. So, but we're struggling to feed 8 billion people. That is actually a big issue, whereas actually we are breeding into existence about 90 billion animals each year for our pleasure.
Sasha, thank you. And Joanna, thank you.
The climate crisis is real, and it's very real in Christchurch. We wouldn't have a flood defence plan here if it wasn't. The Labour Party is committed to addressing this. There's been a real missed opportunity for investing in green energy. Through the establishment of the Great British Energy Company, a publicly owned company, there's going to be huge investment in renewable energy. What that looks like in Dorset, we will absolutely be working with local people to make sure that we have the right renewable energy here, be it solar, tidal, wind, remains to be seen, but there will be big investment in renewable energy from the Labour Party.
Joanna, thank you very much. So we're going to take some supplementary questions. Anyone on this theme, particularly thinking about Dorset, but we've gone a bit more worldwide than that as well. Thinking about the climate, renewables, insulation, emissions, the global threat to the environment, thinking about green industry and flooding, all of that came up in the responses. Anyone who's not asked a question yet, let's have Rich on the front row here. Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you. My name is Rich Silverwood. It appears to me that one of the biggest barriers to many green initiatives is planning. Planning seems to take years and years and years. What will your party do to address that issue?
Thank you. Who'd like to kick us off? Susan. Yeah, thank you.
Well, I just wanted to, before I'll address your question in a moment, but I wanted to say something about Dorset, because I was talking more about nationally and globally. Nationally. In Dorset, there is, it's not this constituency, but there is a Tory, Conservative MP called Richard Drax, who is cutting down original native forest to create biomass, and for his billionaire power station in the north. Biomass subsidies need to end. He claims that it's carbon-free, but of course it isn't. Thank you.
Christopher, feel free to respond.
Well, I think the lady is mixing up the Drax power station with Richard Drax, the MP. They've got nothing to do with each other.
Okay, thank you. Any other response to Rich's question?
That's not
what
true.
About planning? How's that going to help us with the issues of the environment, particularly in Dorset? Simon, thank you.
I think there is a significant shortage of qualified town planners and planning officers, and just like with the nurses, I think there should be an incentive for young people to train into those professions. At BCP, we've really struggled to recruit new planning officers, and that is often why a lot of the planning applications in this area take so long, is because there just isn't enough staff. We end up having to outsource this function elsewhere, so incentivise young people to come into those professions.
Yeah, thanks, Simon. Yeah, Steve, thank you.
We've long had a long-standing UKIP policy for as long as I can recall, certainly over 10 years. One of the problems with planning is that it's complex. You elect local councillors, but nevertheless they're pretty powerless when it comes to many planning issues, because of course the planning officers tell them, no, I'm sorry, you can't do that. We believe that on major planning issues, I'm talking about big developments, that type of thing, there should be the opportunity for binding local referenda on those issues, so that local people have a say in what happens in their communities.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to respond to this? Yeah, Mike, thank you.
Yeah, well, I think that last suggestion probably means that nothing would ever get built ever, because you'd never get a referendum agreement on a big project, which you'll be looking for in terms of planning for climate change. So one of the answers to which Miss UKIP guy, sorry, I forgot your name now, Steve has said that is, what about China and what about India? Well, what is the problem with us cleaning up our act? What is the problem with us actually having clean air, clean water? That's it doesn't matter that China and India are doing it wrong. It's our environment which we have to live in and which our children have to live in. And we should do everything we can to clean it up and as soon as possible.
Thank you. Joanna, then I want to give Simon opportunity to respond. Steve, you can come back if it's very brief. And Susan, I think I saw you looking like you wanted to say something more as well. But let's go with Joanna first. Thank you.
Just to say thank you, Kevin. Planning is a real issue. It goes hand in hand with these big developments, and also with house building. The two go hand in hand. You need to reform planning as well to be able to get these big developments over the line. That's part of a key aspect of sort of Labour's manifesto, is that as well as investing in renewable energy, that you will reform the planning system so that these things don't fall at the first hurdle. Thank you.
I just want to say something very quickly about, because I didn't address the question, why is planning taking so long? It's been taking so long because there has been no sense of urgency from the government about mitigating climate change. Thank you.
Thank you. Sasha, anything to add? No, that's fine. Steve, you wanted to make a very brief point, if you would.
Yes, the 30-second response, if that's all right. Basically, I mean, it was suggested that somehow I'm against clean air. Well, nobody wants dirty air. That's not the point. The real point is we are exporting our production at massive economic cost to our country and massive economic cost to jobs. So it's money and jobs, and they are essential for a thriving economy.
Okay, thank you. So opportunity for one more supplementary question. Yeah, pink shirt over there. Nigel, if you got a mic, if you would, just say who you are. That would be really helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. My name's Andy. I live in Fairmile. It seems to me the candidates so far can be divided into two broad groups on the environment. Those who are in favour of net zero and the climate emergency the world faces, and those that want to kick our net zero commitments into the long grass. So I've got two related questions. The first is to those that want to advance environmental policies and increase investment. How would you pay for those investments? And for those that think this isn't so urgent, how can that be justified when the International Panel on Climate Change has already said we are at the precipice now of irreversible damage to the climate? How can you justify that position in not taking action as urgently as it needs to be?
Okay, Andy, thank you. So two-part question. Decide which part of it or both you want to respond to. You've got 1 minute each if you'd like to respond. Susan, you look poised, ready to go.
Sorry, I've lost it. I've lost the question.
That's okay. Anyone else want to respond? We'll come back to Susan. Simon, thank you. Come on, Joanna, third time lucky.
Labour's been really clear in its manifesto that to fund the GB Energy company, it's going to have a proper windfall tax on oil and gas giants, which it estimates is going to bring in approximately 1.2 billion a year. So it's clearly worked out how it's going to fund it. It's not an empty promise.
Thank you. Susan, then Simon.
Yeah, sorry, I'd forgotten the key word of funding. Yes, the Green Party also intend to heavily tax polluters in order, I said this in my opening statement, I think, or in another answer to another question, to fund investment in green energy. It's all been calculated. Tax the polluters. Pardon?
So just for those on the
live stream. The big polluters.
Susan, one moment, because people on the live stream won't hear without the mics. Andy's making the comment, we're all polluters, so we should therefore all be taxed. Your response?
Sorry, I just said, when I say the polluters, I mean the big companies, oil, coal and gas. I'm not an oil, coal or gas company.
Okay, thank you. Simon, did you want to respond?
Yeah, thank you. I don't think we should be taxing the oil companies and things, because I feel like that they pass on those costs then to the consumer, and the people that get hit the hardest from that is then the people that are already struggling, and we're in a cost of living crisis. How I would fund that is I would stop wasting money elsewhere. Things like HS2, which has wasted billions of pounds, which could have easily been spent on some of these projects that would have really supported the community and producing more energy.
Thank you. Mike, you look poised to respond.
Going back to that last point, I think the money's been spent on potholes, from what I can gather. So it's probably been wasted because the potholes are just as big as they were before. In terms of your answer to your question, how do we actually fund the investment? It is an investment, and therefore you can borrow. And there's a green investment bank. If you set up a green investment bank, we can borrow through the green investment bank into the future, because it is the future that we're trying to protect.
Thank you. Christopher, yeah.
The international situation, and that's what we're talking about, climate change is an international issue. And our CO2 emissions as a country, if we eliminated them all, if we stopped breeding and closed everything down completely, that would equate to 1 year's increase in CO2 emissions in China. That's why we've got to be realistic about this. We've done what we've done. I referred to our record earlier on. As a country, we're trying to set a global example, but there's no point in us destroying our own economy and undermining the individuals in this country who can't afford heat pumps, they can't afford to change their cars to an electric car, and so on. And why should we be in the process of trying to penalise those people who haven't got the resources on the altar of climate change, when we know that we as a country have done our damnedest to try and deal with this, but other countries are not following our example?
Thank you. Steve and Sasha, you've not had opportunity to respond. I've seen you indicating Susan. Steve.
Right, it is a global issue, and the reason that you can pick out China is we're basically closing our industries down and exporting to China, where they have much muckier methods of production using, even our coal-powered stations that we closed down were actually super efficient ones compared to some of the ones that are being built in China. We are 1% of CO2 emissions. China is 29.2% of world CO2 emissions. So it is a global issue. We could, exactly what Christopher said, shut down everything and it will make no difference.
Thank you. Sasha.
I'll just repeat myself. We actually transitioned to plant-based diet. Again, this is just one of the most effective ways to tackle climate change. So there's nothing else I can add to this. It's a very simple solution.
Sasha, thank you. And Susan, 30 seconds, and then we're going to move on.
I am very tired of listening about China and India and what they're doing. Why do we have to be pulled down to the lowest common denominator? You know, if one person goes upskirting, does it mean that I have the right to do it as well? No.
Okay, thank you. We're going to move on to another question. I'm going to read this question out because I'm not going to risk it coming from the floor, because I suspect it won't happen. We're on the theme of immigration at this point. Again, according to the 2023 State of Dorset report, only 6.1% of residents are from an ethnic minority, which is significantly lower than the national average. Would you agree that immigration should not form an important part of the inter-party debate in both Dorset and Christchurch more specifically? It's a question about immigration. Sasha, we're going to kick off with you this time, please.
Well, I'm a migrant and immigrant myself, so yeah, of course it is an important question that we need to raise. And sorry, I forgot what I was going to say. I'm really sorry. Can I just pass it on to somebody else? Is that okay? Thank you.
Thank you. Steve, can we come to you next?
As I mentioned earlier, the net migration to the whole UK, not just Dorset, but this is a massive migration is a countrywide issue. And net migration has rocketed in recent years, massively, incredibly so. 685,000 net migration in 1 year, last year. And we're not even building 250,000 houses in the same period of time. And we've already got massive problems with housing shortage. So yes, we do have to address immigration, and yes, of course, not in front of the horses and you might frighten the children is a typical sort of attitude, but it's a grown-up debate and we must discuss it. This country has become dependent on mass immigration and it's socially divisive.
Thank you. Joanna, can we come to you next? Thank you.
It's important that immigration is part of the debate because many people feel strongly about it, you know, whichever way you feel about it. It's really important that we have a clear policy for immigrants. We have refugees seeking to come here, they're fleeing their homes. We need to be processing people properly. We need to be treating people with dignity and respect. If they're people, if they've come here and they don't have a legal right to be here, we shouldn't be paying to hotels to put them up. It's a huge waste of money. We need to be treating people properly, processing them, and if they should be sent back, we should be sending them back in a respectful way. People say that immigrants place a huge pressure on our local services. It's really misconstrued. That's not the case. One of the single biggest cost to our local authority is adult social care. We have a growing population. We need to properly look at how we fund and resource adult social care. We also need to treat immigrants with respect, and we need to make sure we have a proper policy for how we treat them. Thank you.
Joanna, thank you. Mike, can we come to you?
I think the question was, would I agree that it should form part of the discussions for people in Dorset? I probably agree, yes. They shouldn't, particularly because actually the problem in Dorset is very, very small. However, there is, and I completely agree, there is a national problem. There is a large amount of immigration, which is, you know, we were promised immigration, what is it, in the tens of thousands by the Conservatives? And what happened to that promise? It's been completely destroyed, and it's been destroyed because they've not invested in actually funding the migration department. The civil servants have not processed those applications because they've been underfunded. Because civil servants have not been able to do their job properly because of changing government policies. I mean, I'll give you one quick example, is that the cost of the hotels to put up asylum seekers is huge. It runs into millions and millions of pounds every year. I personally know options to virtually halve that cost, but the Conservatives have refused to go along with that because it's in their interest to whip up this sort of sentiment that we've got at the moment.
Okay, Chris, we'll come to you because reference was made to the Conservatives.
The question is based on a false premise because it tries to equate ethnicity and immigration together. But not all immigration is from amongst people from ethnic minorities. For example, the large number of people who've come to the country from Ukraine, we wouldn't describe them as an ethnic minority. I think to talk of this in terms of ethnicity is wrong. What we should be doing is looking at it in terms of overall population. As a country, can we afford to increase our population by 2 million every 2 or 3 years, which is what's been happening over recent years? I don't think we can because of the pressure on public services upon our small island community. And that is affecting Dorset as it's affecting everywhere else in the country and putting pressure for more development and more damage to the environment because we cannot cope with such a rapidly rising population. So I'd all be in favour of not a national immigration policy so much as a national population policy.
John, Mike, grab your mic and come back very quickly.
So you consider Ukrainians okay, but other people are not? And what are those other people? Are they black, for instance?
That is a complete misrepresentation of what I was saying. I was saying that the questioner, in saying that 6.1% are from an ethnic minority, that Ukrainians are not regarded as an ethnic minority. So the Ukrainians who settled in Dorset, and a good warm welcome to them, but it's wrong to suggest that this is about ethnicity. It's about people and population.
Okay, Susan, thank you.
Yes, I agree with the colleagues on either side of me that immigrants have to be, they're human beings like we are. They have to be treated with respect, the same respect as we want to be treated with. Treat your neighbour as you would yourself, etc. Many of the people coming here, including illegally, or maybe mostly illegally, I'm not sure, are fleeing war, persecution, torture, famine, and the only moral stance is to treat them with dignity and help them. We're a good country. We're good people. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to come to Simon, and then we'll come back to you, Sasha, and we're going to give you 1 minute, Sasha. Okay, Simon, thank you.
Thank you very much. Our housing supply ran out many, many years ago, and I think it's logical to say we don't have the room. I'm not saying that we should turn people away. There should definitely be a system, but we are the national message that should be going out globally is this country is full. We have 120 families currently homeless at BCP. We have 4,000 people waiting for a home on the housing register list. This country is already full. Now, don't get me wrong, if people end up here, like others have said, we need to process them and put them somewhere. But the national message that should be going out globally is this country is full and there is no more room.
Okay, thank you. Sasha.
My position starts with compassion, of course, and always. So, and as a country, we need to analyze our own role in contributing to people needing to leave other countries and their homeland, such as unrest and also climate breakdown. So right now, immigration is only just the tip of the iceberg, because when we actually start facing the real climate immigration, there will be a huge influx of people coming or traveling to the north to avoid the heat, so to speak. But at the same time, as from the Animal Welfare Party, so we believe that a sensible and compassionate immigration policy, but at the same time serving our own needs and healthcare and plant-based farming. So we do support calls for safe and legal routes for asylum seekers. We call for reform of the asylum system, speeding up the processing, but also treating them with dignity whilst their cases are being reviewed. Thank you.
Sasha, thank you. So really important question of immigration. Yeah, we've got a supplementary question here on the front, so we'll take you two guys at the front. Gentlemen first. Just say who you are. Sorry, I will look your way as well. Thank you.
Thank you. So far tonight, we've heard about how you would provide more immigration caseworkers, more hospitals, more doctors, free public transport, a new energy company. But there is no bottomless pit of money, and to governors to choose. So what would you choose to deprioritise?
Your name, sir?
I'm Tom.
Tom. Thanks, Tom. Anyone wishing to respond? Susan, thank you, and then we'll go to Simon.
Would prioritise multimillionaires and billionaires.
Simon, thank you.
I'd prioritise building houses. Houses are fundamental.
So for those on the live stream, question being asked from the floor from the same questioner who was Tom was actually there isn't enough money around. What are you going to cut to create money to deal with these issues?
I would deprioritise non-core services, so anything that isn't core services, which HS2 I mentioned earlier, not a core service, shouldn't have ever really gone ahead. That money could have been and I could probably name a couple of others as well. So those, the non-core services.
Okay, Simon, thank you. Mike?
As somebody who works in business, I would deprioritise bureaucracy. I'd have a bonfire of the bureaucracy that you have to go through just to do a simple tax return, just to do a simple benefit claim, just to do, get an appointment to the GP, just to do, the very simple things in life. You have to go through so many processes. Take the police service, for instance. They spend far more time filling in forms than they do actually walking the beat. And therefore, I would deprioritise massively the bureaucracy involved in across the board.
Thank you. Christopher?
Well, I agree with Mike Cox about that, absolutely. And The problem we've got is a lack of productivity in the public services, and also immense waste. And to give just an example, our local hospitals, at the latest count, 244 people are in our local hospitals ready to leave, and they're still occupying beds there at a cost of between £500 and £1,000 per day. Think of the costs of that, and how if we reduce that number down to near net zero, then we'd be able to save all that money for the health service.
Thank you. Joanna, you look poised to respond.
I'm afraid I agree with Mike Cox. It costs too much at the moment to do all these plans. We've got great ambitions. Hand in hand with these great ambitions comes reform. Reforming the planning process so it isn't so expensive. If someone needs to go benefits, reforming that system so that it isn't so expensive to get them onto that process. These grand ambitions don't come alone. It comes with a really well thought out process of reform so that it is cost effective.
Okay, thank you. Stephen, Sasha, you've not yet responded. Would you like to? Yeah, Sasha, thank you.
Thank you. I think social care would probably be priority for me, including the mental health and support and that, and education as well, because healthy mind, healthy heart. So I think if we support social care services, I think that will address a lot of issues that we're currently facing in many ways.
Okay,
including the compassion and ethics.
So we're on the theme of immigration, just remember. So we're talking, the specific question was how actually we're going to save some money elsewhere in order to fund the challenge of immigration. Steve, have you got a comment? And then Mike, 30 seconds. And then I'm going to go to the folk I've turned my back on. Sorry, Pauline. Steve.
Well, by a mass cull on the numbers of, not cull, that's the wrong word, but by cutting down the numbers of immigrants that we allow into this country, what we believe is that we should each year have a population checkup, births, deaths, migrants, those who've left the country, so that we actually have zero population growth. And we need to do that for a number of years to give us some breathing space, basically. I've already mentioned about the numbers of net migrants. Go back to the 1950s, the 1960s, the 1970s, 80s, and the 1990s, up until Tony Blair was elected. We had a very stable net migration of 50,000 a year. It's now 7 or 8 times that.
Thank you. Mike, 30 seconds.
At the risk of agreeing with Sir Christopher too much, the example you gave about bed blocking is absolutely right. But in order to do that, you have to tackle the issue of social care. Without tackling social care, you'll get nowhere.
Okay, thank you. If your question could be related to immigration, that would be really helpful, or make it a very clear tangent.
It is, definitely.
Thank you.
I live in a retirement development, and a number of our residents have regular care every day. Without the immigrants, they wouldn't have any, because they're all immigrants. And before I retired, I worked in a care home in Christchurch, and I worked with 50 different nationalities. And it was a real encouragement to me. I got on really well with them. And we've heard a lot about housing, and needing to build 300,000 houses a year is what's been bandied around.
Can I encourage you to a question?
The question is, we're not training people. We're not training people to do the jobs. We got rid of the polytechnics. You're going to build houses, you need people to do it. If you reduce the immigration, you won't have builders.
Okay, I'm going to stop you there. There's an implied question, although the question never came. Would anyone like to respond? And I do want to take us on to another theme in the very small amount of time we've got left. Steve.
Yeah, I already covered it in terms of nursing earlier, but the same goes for the care sector and many other sectors. And that is that we need to move away from this ridiculous notion that 50% of our school leavers need to be graduates. Why do we need 50% need to be graduates? It's an absolute nonsense. My daughter, she went off to Wolverhampton University to do microbiology. There's good employment prospects after that. But after, just a few weeks, she realized it was not for her. So she basically gave them notice. She paid off her one-term student debt. She got an apprenticeship, and she's a chef now. And we need more people going into apprenticeships, and we need much more emphasis on promoting this in schools. None of this graduation stuff. Yes, of course, a small number of graduates, but largely we need to get our young people into employable positions.
Joanna, thank you. If I can take you back to social care and immigration, which was the nature of the point being made. Joanna, did you want to respond?
Oh, absolutely. They play such an important role in so many of our public services. I've been looked after by people of all different nationalities in hospital, as have my children. They've saved their lives. We have got to stop talking about them as if they don't belong here. They are a really important and valuable part of our society.
Thank you. Okay. Yeah, Christopher, a quick point, then I'm going to move us on to the next thing.
During this campaign, I've spoken to quite a lot of care agencies in Christchurch and in Ferndown, and what they all said to me was that they are employing and recruiting from overseas because they can't get local people to actually take up these jobs. And that comes back to the issues around welfare, on which the Prime Minister has spoken recently, and also the issue of trying to incentivise people to take up these jobs. At the moment, the job centres refer people to these agencies, and the people who are applicants don't even bother to turn up for interviews. I've heard that directly from these agencies.
Okay, thank you. We're going to move on to our next theme. We're going to move on to our next theme because time is rapidly running away. Coming to education specifically, question from Bernie Bunn, who I think might be here, but I'm going to ask the question, says, how do you propose to stem the exodus of teachers from schools, primary schools in particular? How do you propose to stem the exodus of teachers from schools, primary schools in particular? And we're going to start with Simon. Thank you.
Pay them better, I think, is probably a good start. And a little bit of an old school view, but I feel like we need some old school discipline back in the schools as well, where nowadays the teachers do not feel empowered to be able to discipline the kids when they play up.
Thank you, Christopher.
Well, is there an exodus of teachers from primary schools? I think the exodus of teachers is largely from the secondary schools, and that's because of the discipline issue to which Simon has referred. But there's also far too much bureaucracy. But while we're on the subject of education, can I put in a plea on behalf of the parents and pupils at Parkfield School, which is faced with closure, and nobody up to now has mentioned it during this debate.
Thank you. Mike, thank you. We're going to listen to Mike, then Susan will come to you.
I'm really getting worried now. I'm going to agree with Sir Christopher a bit too much. My daughter is a teacher, but she teaches in the secondary school, and you're absolutely right. The problem there is discipline, and also funding. There's no problem with the teachers at the beginning. She gets paid very well as a new teacher. It's actually the grading system further up there. That's why they're leaving, because of the pressure that the bureaucracy is forcing those teachers not to teach, but to fill in forms. And that has got to change. It really does.
Thank you, Susan.
Oh, sorry, and to go on to Parkville, Parkville's a free school. It was £35 million was spent on that school by the Conservative government. It's a free school. You know, it was a complete waste of money. And what's happening with that school is that BCP is now having to pick up the tab and make sure that those parents and those children have to get educated properly in good local schools. And they're on that, and they're doing that now. But what we want to do is to repurpose that building so that and I've asked for this specifically, is that they consider it for SEND school in this part of the
Thank you.
authority.
Susan.
Yes, I agree with Mike about the working conditions of teachers in secondary schools. As I said, I'm a retired teacher. The last time I worked in a secondary school, I was working a 12-hour day. I was working a 12-hour day under difficult conditions with discipline, bureaucracy. Some of our schools are crumbling, they're underfunded. I think teachers need a pay rise. I remember one head teacher actually committing suicide because of Ofsted. I don't think we need Ofsted. In fact, I think we need to not have Ofsted. Yes, all I can say is that conditions in secondary schools are bad. I know that firsthand. For the work these teachers are doing, the pay is really minimal. We need to invest in the next generation. It's our best investment. Thank you.
Thank you. Sasha, and then Steve, and then Joanna. Thank you.
We must support teachers through better working conditions and professional development opportunities, and of course fair compensation. So we should create a positive and a supportive work environment to improve job satisfaction. But also I think it is important that we must introduce scientism in the curriculum at school, because by addressing that we will promote a more inclusive and ethical mindset among students, and that will prepare them to tackle contemporary issues such as sustainability and climate crisis. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
I'll just give you one statistic. 83% of teachers are female. Now, is that a good thing or is that a bad thing? What it does mean, therefore, is 17% are male. And where are the male role models in our schools? They are diminishing, and the trend is going more and more. The figures are slightly different for head teachers, still predominantly female, but each year it's growing. The trend is going more and more that way. And it's something that I think is important, because one of the worst statistics, I won't give the statistics, but one of the worst outcomes in education at the moment is the outcome of boys, their results, in particular white boys. This is a trend that is not good for this country. So although it may not be a popular thing to say, I do think that does need to be addressed.
Thank you. Joanna.
It's absolutely right that we need more investment in education. Education as a whole. We need to pay our teachers better. We need to respect them more. We need to reform Ofsted so that it isn't so overwhelmingly stressful for our teachers. But part of that investment, people talk here about behaviour in schools. Labour has a plan to introduce free breakfasts for all primary school students. If pupils are fed and they're not hungry, they're going to behave better in the classrooms. We need to have early speech and language interventions to make sure that children, any issues are picked up early, so that, if they're not picked up early, behaviour might drop. It's going to make a teacher's job more stressful. We need to see more mental health support in schools to better to support our children in an environment that's really important to them. Respecting teachers, making sure they're paid, but it's broader than that. The whole education system needs better funding and better support.
Joanna, thank you. Now, having 9 candidates makes keeping time incredibly challenging, and the reality is we're not going to have time for any more questions this evening if each candidate is going to have opportunity to share, and if we are going to finish on time. So I'm going to lead us towards our closing statements, which each candidate has about a minute or so each in order to share. I'm in fact going to be incredibly gracious and give you all 1 minute 30 seconds to share, which will roughly bring us in on time around 9 o'clock. What I would like to say, if you do have burning questions still or anything that any of the candidates have said that you'd specifically like to speak to them about or challenge them over, I'm sure none of them are going to be rushing away. And as long as we close this building by about 7 tomorrow morning, then that'll be absolutely fantastic. So we're going to head to our closing statements. 1.5 minutes if you'd like to use the 1.5 minutes. We're going to go in the same order that we began to open. And I'm trying to remember, did we begin with Susan, I think? Thank you so much.
People of Christchurch, you can choose a fairer, safer, greener, happier future for us all. You can choose the bravery and honesty and sheer common sense of the Green Party, who have not self-interest, but keeping our planet habitable for us all at heart. You can choose a tax on obscene wealth to fix our NHS and other public services. And you can choose to have ownership of those services again. You can choose to listen to scientists on matters of science, not self-interested politicians who don't know, by their own admission, don't know the science. Choose your future and your children. Choose to vote Green for real hope and real change. Sooner or later, a green economy is inevitable. Choose sooner, choose it now. Thank you.
Susan, thank you so much. Mike, to you, thank you.
Thank you. You've heard an awful lot tonight about what each individual candidate has to offer. Some of them are very different, some of them are a bit cooky, and some of them are serious. The current polls are suggesting that the winner in this constituency would scrape in with less than 1/3 of the vote share. That's an appalling state of affairs in our democracy today, particularly if 2/3 think you're the last choice. In this election, we have a real chance to change who represents us in Parliament. Voting with heart rather than head will change nothing. I came second last time, and for Sir Christopher's benefit, according to the YouGov poll, which is the only one that names individual candidates, I'm also running second, within spitting distance. And if nothing changes, I will come second again. This is your vote, it's your voice, but it's your children's future. So please vote with your head rather than your heart. Thank you.
Michael, thank you so much. Sasha, thirdly to yourself.
The Animal Welfare Party stands for a holistic approach to policymaking that benefits humans, non-humans, and the planet itself. So our policies are rooted in compassion, sustainability, and a commitment to the well-being of all living beings. We recognize the urgent need to address the climate and biodiversity crisis, and we believe that prioritizing these issues in all political decisions is essential for the future of our community and our world. On July the 4th, a vote for me is a vote for a compassionate, sustainable, and prosperous future for Christchurch and the New Forest areas. As someone who values activism and animal rights, humans are also animals, I am dedicated to addressing urgent challenges like climate and biodiversity crisis, sustainable housing, and public health through plant-based diets. By promoting sentientism and tackling speciesism, we can create a fairer society for all beings. So together we can make a difference for our community and the planet. Thank you.
Sasha, thank you. And Simon McCormack, thank you.
This election is about trust. Do you want to give that trust to one of the political parties that have let you down before, or an independent that has built that trust within this community in the last 5 years?
Simon, thank you. Christopher.
Right.
Can I thank you for comparing this, and also the audience for some really good questions. And can I thank my fellow candidates for their contributions? And can I say for myself, as obviously Mike has conceded that I may be regarded as the favourite in this election, but if I'm privileged to be re-elected as your Member of Parliament on the 4th of July, I shall continue to try and serve everybody, regardless of their political views, to the best of my ability, as I have been trying to do for quite a long time already. And can I say we're very lucky to have a beautiful constituency in a strong town in Christchurch and the other smaller towns and villages around. It's a great privilege to be able to be here. But if there is a Labour government which is elected on a blank cheque basis and almost on a Trojan horse for socialism, which is on the back of Starmer, then I shall, if I'm elected as your Member of Parliament, I shall devote myself to trying to prevent the worst excesses coming from that socialist government.
Thank you, Christopher, and rather appropriately, Joanna, you're next.
Thank you, Chris. And thank you, everyone, for attending. We've covered some really important issues tonight. There are so many more things we could have spoken about. Labour has a fully costed manifesto to earn back your trust. People might say it's modest, that it doesn't go far enough, but please look at it as an indication as to what Labour's intentions are. First and foremost, economic growth. With that comes investment in our public services, a fairer playing field for small businesses to regenerate our high streets, and a living wage for working people. Labour plans to create a brighter and more stable future for everybody. It's time for change in Britain. If you look at all but one of the polls, Labour's the only party that can beat the Conservatives in Christchurch. So if you want change in Christchurch, please vote for Labour on the 4th of July. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanna. And last but not least, Steve Unwin. Thank you.
I've had it mentioned to me on the doorstep about Christopher Chope's age. But as we've seen tonight, actually, by American standards, he's really quite young. Anyway, I will be around afterwards, so I will be prepared to answer questions on absolutely anything, apart from my private life, which, of course, is impeccable. And thank you for the organisers for arranging this great hustings.
Thank you. Well, we're 2 minutes ahead of schedule, but I wonder if we can show our huge appreciation to our candidates who are standing for us this year. I would just like to say thank you as well to the venue here at God First for hosting this occasion. Perhaps we can show our appreciation to them. To the churches of Christchurch for pulling this event together, which actually was the only occasion, I think, in your diaries where all of you have sat on the same stage. So thank you to the churches of Christchurch. And I want to say thank you to you as well for coming along this evening and so respectfully engaging and in listening this evening. God bless you all. Thank you for being with us. Please don't feel you have to rush away. Enjoy having conversations with each other